2007 when I was working with CMDA in Kansas City, and he knew that we were getting ready to make a change, my wife and me, and he came and got me and said the guy in San Antonio was retiring, and 11 years later we're still here. And so so I've always appreciated that very much, always been very, very involved in CMDA leadership, on our local advisory board, and in many, many other ways. Please welcome with me Dr. Fred Brown.
Thank you, Scott. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Getting Scott and his wife Shelley here was a divine appointment, and the Lord actually sent two people to the national meeting with the intent of finding Scott, and that was Kelly. And unbeknownst to each of us, that we had in our mind that Scott might be a good candidate. So it was great to collaborate with that unbeknownst. Today I'm blessed, and Shearer Hills Baptist Church, thank you so much. I am in your time slot, and it's a wonderful opportunity, and I thank you for your generosity for allowing me to participate. And thanks for the lunch. Today I'm blessed to share with you matters of science and also matters of the heart. Our careers in medicine and dentistry are blessed with the wonders and mysteries of the Lord's creation. And he delights us with scientific and medical surprises on a daily basis. We're called upon to be our professional best, namely to be lifelong learners, to deal well with ambiguities, to have agile minds, to have a healthy skepticism, and to know and acknowledge the scientific limitations. One of the guest speakers here was Dr. Richard Swenson, author of Margin and Minute of Margin, and he's spoken here numerous times. And he has an anecdote that demonstrates the point. At a medical school graduation, the featured speaker noted that due to rapidly expanding medical and scientific knowledge, 50% of all that had been taught to the graduates that day will eventually be proven to be wrong. He added that the challenge is that they were unaware of which 50% was wrong. And I can think of medical reversals and have a list of those in my career, 180-degree reversals. To quote another prominent educator, if he was wise in any respect, it was in the knowledge of his own ignorance. Socrates. Some of the most challenging questions that I've had with difficult answers come from the mouths of babes. This picture is 10 years ago, and you know personally when somebody is staring at you. Well, my 4-year-old grandson on the right was staring at me, right in this setting. And I just waited and waited until he had something to say, and he said, "Grandpa, how come all the hair on your head is at the back of your head?" So I thought for a minute and said, ran my hands through my hair and said, "For speed." And that was it. He took it. His older brother, later on that year, we were at the community pool. Now, they have 2 younger brothers, and my daughter, their mother, was breastfeeding the baby. And we're at the community pool, and the older boy, 6 years old, says to me, "Grandpa, how come men have nipples?" Lord knows. But let me give you an example of limitations of our knowledge and understanding of physiology, and that's in my specialty of obstetrics and gynecology, hypothalamic pituitary ovarian uterine axis. The descriptions are eloquent. However, the explanation of the initiation of the processes and the mechanisms of propagation are insufficient. Now, the purpose of this cycle, 28-day cycle, is procreation. To stimulate ovulation of a single ovum in the vicinity of a lush endometrium with the hopes of conception if there happen to be any spermatozoa in the neighborhood. So this is an interesting chart, and I don't have access to a pointer, which is okay, because you can follow this and you all, the scientific minds, understand it. But what you do is you start off. Here we go. This is day one, and at this point you have the lowest levels of estrogen and progesterone. The hypothalamus realizes that the levels are low, and it sends a protein hormone, gonadotropin-releasing hormone, to the pituitary to release follicle-stimulating hormone, which increases a little bit. But this follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates a dominant follicle down in the ovary. The ovary in the dominant follicle makes estrogen. The estrogen rises up like this, and lo and behold, the pituitary discovers that it reaches a certain threshold, and it releases luteinizing hormone. And at that point, the ova pops out of the egg, and the follicle converts into a corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum makes progesterone, which changes the endometrium from secretory to proliferative to secretory. This is the lush endometrium that is the cushion down into which you have splashdown with the blastocyst, or the day 5 or 6 of the bambino. And then on day 12, it's realized that there's not a conception. And the corpus luteum involutes. You get a rapid decrease in progesterone, which destroys the secretory endometrium. You have crumbling and sloughage and menstruation. And then the cycle repeats. The information on this slide, as is, has not changed in 50 years. And I share with you today that we have no earthly idea what determines the selection of the dominant follicle, what allows the ovum to leave the follicle, how the pituitary, the ovary, and the corpus luteum know that a conception has not occurred, why does the corpus luteum involute, why do so many spermatozoa, we're talking about millions, are necessary for so few ova, generally one per cycle. Why does the sperm, only one sperm penetrate the zona pellucida? What is the mechanism of the initiation of cell division? How and why does embryonic development occur? Again, this has not changed in 50 years, and we still do not have good explanations. The science of medicine is replete with such scenarios. Now I will share with you the science of ultrasound that has answered many of the questions in the science of procreation. In January of 2012, actually I'm sequence here. Okay, the science of ultrasound is relatively new, and the science of development has had a meteoric rise. They're very interesting parallels to technology that we have in computers, in satellites, and also in medicine with endoscopy, CT, MRI, to name a few. These are some of the blessings of modern medicine, and we praise God from whom all blessings flow. Now, ultrasound, the first clinical presentation at a national meeting was in 1964, and ultrasound was not clinically available until the early 70s. In the early 70s, they had M mode, which is the 1972, says B mode. Excuse me, the B mode, and that's basically the sonar beam that goes out and comes back, and then it fills in a screen similar to an Etch-a-Sketch. And then in 1976, you had grayscale, where you had a multi-phase array in a transducer the size of an eraser from a chalkboard, and it would send out multiple sonic impulses and get back the echo, and then that would fill in the screen in real time. So you would have motion. Excuse me, the grayscale was going from black and white to variations in density, from black being sonolucent and white being very hard. And so when you see things that are white in the ultrasound, that is bone. When you see things that are totally black, that's liquid. In 1990, we had the transvaginal or intercavitary ultrasound, and in 2005, we had the 3D and 4D ultrasounds. Now, in January of 2012, I retired from the teaching position at Christus Santa Rosa Family Medicine Residency Program here in San Antonio. And I share with you that my 8 years there comprised the best chapter in my medical career. This was a faith-based organization, which was a Christian organization. The mission statement was to extend the healing ministry of Jesus Christ. It was permissible for me to share that I was a Christian physician and to assess spiritual histories, not only on the patients, but also in the people that rotated with me. It was a premier independent residency program that attracted the best and the brightest young physicians from around the country. And even though there were a high number of committed Christians in the program, also participating at the level of faculty, administrators, residents, and medical students, covered a wide spectrum, from Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, and secular humanists. Now, my role was the player coach, and I always had somebody at my elbow. That was, and the beauty of it also, having been in private practice, where there are time constraints and financial constraints, is that my schedule was modified at an appropriate level so that I could teach as we went, and it was just added a wonderful margin to the day. So namely, in a full practice setting as a player coach, my mission was to teach. This was an opportunity, as I'll show you in a minute, to share the miracle of life with all of those without having to say a word. Now, as an obstetrician, gynecologist in a teaching role, I was blessed to perform the ultrasounds. I was the ultrasonographer. Now, in the broad range of medical procedures, as you all proceed through your careers in medicine and dentistries, there are three attributes of ultrasound that are truly spectacular. Number one, basic ultrasonography is rapidly learned. Number two, there are no medical complications. Number three, the highly technical apparatus is durable and not exorbitantly expensive. Now, in my clinical setting, on a typical ultrasound morning, I would perform a 20-week ultrasound on the first patient in the morning. So we'd have 8 or 10 patients on the schedule. And I would do this with whoever was rotating with me, and they would be looking over my shoulder as we're at the ultrasound, and the patient is there. And they're looking at me, and with my left hand, I'm running the data entry, and we're looking at it, and we're taking the images. Ultrasound is so readily learned that by the end of the morning, that person, be it a third-year student or a second-year resident, they would perform a similar study with my supervision. And this is an absolutely amazing sequence of events in medical education. A very important ultrasound that is performed is the one in the middle of pregnancy at 4.5 months. This is the last time when the full body image of the unborn baby or preborn baby is visualized. It's a time where there is an anatomic survey where you measure top to bottom, front to back, side to side, and check for confirming the due date, make sure there's appropriate intrauterine growth for the bambino, and it's also the best time to take a look to see if you have indoor plumbing or outdoor plumbing for gender identification. Now, using this as an example, this is the same blonde grandson that we had. Imagine that this blanket up here is the placenta, and there's the eye sockets and the jaw and the forehead. And you can see a congenitally high forehead as well with this young man. Okay, now, this is one of my favorite shots of an anterior placenta. So that was the red blanket. And there's the jaw, there's the forehead, you can see the spine, you can see the heart, there's a diaphragm here, stomach, this is the kidney, you have an intact anterior chest wall and anterior abdominal wall, and here's the umbilical cord. And this is a 20-week ultrasound, and it's absolutely amazing. Now here's a diagram that shows the most significant improvement in ultrasound. And this improvement was the intercavitary or transvaginal transducer. This bypassed all of the sonic interference that you have from the abdominal wall, from the skin, fat, muscle, bowels. And back in the old days, they used to have to drink 2 liters of urine, not urine. 2 liters of liquid. In our family, we call that a Freudian slip. and have an uncomfortably full bladder in order to use the window of the full bladder in order to sit down the pelvis. This opened up the first trimester amazingly. And then as the technology improved, again, just like with your cell phones and with computers, as that improved, we got better and better and better definition. So let's explore the beginning of life. Now this is an empty uterus. It's a little bit tilted backwards. The myometrium is around the edge here, which is dense, and then less dense or more sonolucent is a very, very lush endometrium. The next picture is at 5 weeks after the first day of the last menstrual period, 21 days from conception, and there's a gestational sac. That gestational sac is the size of a baby aspirin. And because we don't have the acuity or the ability to see what's going on inside that gestational sac, we have to wait for another week. Now this can be a very confusing time because you don't know if it's confirmed to be a normal pregnancy. Here is a twin gestation. Now this was actually the same patient as before, and there's one bambino here and one bambino there, and I still am in contact with that family. Here is a 6-week gestation, and this is the size of an uncooked kernel of rice, and then this is 5 millimeters in length, or 5.5 millimeters in length, and the preborn baby's heartbeat is right here, and it's a beacon. Now this is absolutely amazing because this is where you know that you have a normal pregnancy. This is where you have a heartbeat. This is where you know that there is life. And it's a joy to introduce the preborn babies to the pregnant mothers and to the fathers and the families. It is the beginning of wondrous and beautiful love stories. And it's truly an honor and a privilege to be present as they see and they developed experience love at first sight. At 9 weeks, excuse me, that's 6. At 9 weeks, this is 3 weeks later, the bambino is starting to move. And sometimes you can see it at 8.5 weeks, and you just put the transducer on, excuse me, vaginally, and hold still, and then you see a little bit of movement. This baby, you have a head, you have spine, there's a foot. This child has crossed his legs, and you see the imprint of the foot. This is a 9 weeks gestation. Absolutely amazing. And then at the same time, we can see digits. This baby, so you take the transducer and you go this way, you flip it this way, so you get a transverse of the abdomen. And what we have here is this kid's doing the Hans and Franz move. And his hands are right here in front of him. You can see the digits. Truly amazing. Then at 12 weeks, we get full length of the baby, and full face, it looks like an alien. The shoulders are over here on the side, and that's the torso. And then in this one here, same baby, the head was over here, the spine is here, and then this kernel of rice is the femur, because things that are sonodense are bone. Next, the presentation will be about ultrasound in pregnancy and abortion. The recent statistics that I will share with you are from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services, and from the Guttmacher Institute. The Guttmacher Institute is the policy research institute founded in 1968 by Planned Parenthood Federation of America. The government doesn't do a good job in counting the pregnancies and abortion. The Guttmacher Institute does. And if you want up-to-date information, that's where to go. That's where I have this information. In the past 45 years, over 60 million preborn babies have been aborted. It's the most common surgical procedure in the United States. There are, last year, 2017, slightly under 1 million abortions performed in our country. 19% of all pregnancies are aborted. So roughly we have 4 million deliveries in our country per year instead of 5. 5% of women in our country by the age of 20, which is 1 in 20, will have had an abortion. 20% of women by the age of 30. So the third decade, or in the 20s, is the most common decade for termination of pregnancy. 25% of women by the age of 45. And 45% of these are repeat abortions. Unintended pregnancy. Unintended pregnancies are 45% of the pregnancies in the United States. 44% of the people that experience unintended pregnancy have been using some form of contraception. And in my career, I've seen the whole gamut. I've seen people with IUDs, people on depot, people on birth control pills. I've seen failed vasectomies. I've seen failed tubal ligations. So, but that's the number, 44%. 40% of these will have terminations of pregnancy. An unintended pregnancy is truly a dilemma. And the dilemma is an interesting Greek word, di meaning two, lemma meaning a proposition or a pathway. It's a situation, it's a difficult problem, a situation involving a choice between two equally unsatisfactory alternatives. Now, I will share with you matters of the heart. Matters of my heart. 45 years ago, I was an abortionist. How did that happen? And more than that is that I grieve. One of my heart's greatest sorrows is that the phenomenal technology of ultrasound was not available at that stage in my career. When I graduated from medical school close to 50 years ago, there was not a urine test or a pregnancy test. Ultrasound was not available, it was in developmental stages. The scientific understanding of the preborn baby was rudimentary. We were taught that the uterine contents were just a clump of cells, just tissue, nothing more than a blob of flesh. I was a medical school student at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and ultrasound was not available to demonstrate the truth that abortion stops the beating heart. Now, informing me, imagine being in Washington, D.C. in 67, 68, 69, 70, 71. A lot of things happened. I saw a 18-year-old from the suburbs who had an illegal abortion unbeknownst to her parents. She developed sepsis and she showed up at the charity hospital, DC General, and she died of sepsis. And I saw that as a medical student. Also in Washington, D.C. in 1969, we knew where you could get surgical abortions at upscale OBGYN practices right there in Washington, D.C. and the Maryland and Virginia suburbs where they were available. So what happened next is the Supreme Court, January 22nd, 1973, they had the ruling of Roe versus Wade, and I'm quoting to you the seminal point of their argument, and that is, we need not resolve the question of when life begins. When those trained in the respective disciplines of medicine, philosophy, and theology are unable to arrive at any consensus. The judiciary at this point in the development of man's knowledge is not in a position to speculate as to the answer. Because the Supreme Court would not speculate at the beginning of life, they decreed that abortion was not against the law. It was a private matter between the pregnant woman and her physician. It's important to note that the Supreme Court ruling did not make abortion a constitutional right. So abortion, the elective termination of pregnancy, of a healthy pregnancy, rapidly became an accepted medical procedure. I became a resident in OBGYN and willingly participated. I did what I thought was right in my own eyes. Now, after my residency, I was in the Army. I was stationed in Colorado, and abortion on demand in the first trimester of pregnancy was the standard of care in the Army hospital. I also worked for Planned Parenthood, performing abortions for additional income. The turning point for me was when Congress passed the Hyde Amendment, which was a law that prohibited abortions at government expense or in government facilities. I also was called to the office of the hospital commander, and he directed that I should no longer work for Planned Parenthood. And at that time, I was unaware that this would mark the end of my role as an abortionist. In the early 80s, I resigned from the military and established a private practice in a Catholic hospital in Colorado where abortions were forbidden. The other doctor in the practice was a Christian. He said, he was the founding doctor of the group, and he set the standard that the practice would have nothing to do with abortion. Another big turning point. At the age of 47, through an extended series of divinely guided situations and experiences, I became a Christian. I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I was a new creation. I was blessed to be discipled by spiritual mentors, to have accountability, fellowship, Bible study, and a strong church community. And one January, on a Sunday, in 1996, I was in a worship service, and the pastor presented a sermon on sanctity of life and forgiveness. I was clueless when I walked in that morning. He said, if you've ever been involved in an abortion, confess your sins, and you will be forgiven. To confess your sin, and God is faithful and just and will forgive you your sin and protect you from all unrighteousness. Now, by that time, in my early Christian walk, I was aware of 3 pertinent passages in my study of the Bible. The Old Testament in Exodus and Deuteronomy, one of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not murder. In Proverbs 6, there's a list of 6 things that the Lord hates. One of the things was hands that shed innocent blood. In Deuteronomy 30:19, this day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live. Now I was whelmed. I was immediately whelmed with the stark reality of my past as an abortionist. I had developed a selective memory deficit. I had blocked it. I had absolutely stuffed it. I had proudly kept track of every delivery in my career, and however, if you asked me how many babies I had aborted, I wouldn't know. But it was in the hundreds. The pastor also directed, and this was key, from the book of James, to confess your sin to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. My community of faith rose to the occasion and helped me navigate the turbulent emotional and spiritual challenges. On the one hand, I'm ashamed of the man and the doctor that I once was. On the other hand, confessing sin brings glory to God and brings us closer to Him. I'm so blessed to be where the Lord has led me, assured of His forgiveness through the blood of Jesus. I am so grateful that there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Truly amazing grace. So, ever since, and the reason I'm here, I'm an advocate for the sanctity of life while extending the healing ministry of Jesus Christ. I interact with others, patients, their families, colleagues, residents, medical students, church members, neighbors, and whomever the Lord brings across my path or happens to have sit next to me in an airplane. If it comes up, I'm there. I share with you that based on my transparency of having been an abortionist, there are numerous opportunities in the healing process for women, men, families, and others in medicine in dealing with their participation in abortion. I shared this with a lawyer friend, a male, married, with family, who broke into tears because he had encouraged his girlfriend when in law school, when she became pregnant, to get an abortion, and he paid for it. And he had stopped it. So my testimony was healing for his heart. I emphasize what we now know through the science of procreation and ultrasound, namely that life begins at conception, a genetically unique, fearfully and wonderfully made, preborn human being with human rights and the right to be protected. And secondly, ultrasound proves that abortion stops a beating heart. I'll close with matters of the heart. I've shared with you matters of my heart, some of them magic, some of it tragic. And I ask you to examine your own hearts with 7 challenging questions. Is medicine a moral activity? What is necessary to believe to allow abortion to be rational and ethical? Is abortion medical care? Does abortion promote health or prevent disease? This young man you've seen before, this robust newborn, is in the next 3 images, and we're going chronologically backwards. This was him with the Hans and Franz in 9 weeks. This was him with it showing his foot. This was him at 6 weeks. You haven't seen this slide yet. So I ask you, at what point in his development did he, or in any pregnancy, his or her development as a baby gain human rights? And then, when did you become you? So I thank you for your time and attention. God bless you. And I'll open it up to questions. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Do you believe that they will ever overturn Roe versus Wade?
I believe that our country will come to its senses, and it is my prayer that we look back on the era of abortion the same way we look back on slavery. I pray the same thing for smoking, by the way, too, that smoking will no longer be in the population. But I believe that is where the Lord is leading us. Yeah.
I fear because they would have to admit that we murdered millions of babies.
We have an amazing God.
Amen.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all. Study hard. Have fun. Ask questions. Be skeptical. And if you want to drive your OBGYN professors crazy, ask them why. Thank you.